I'm not sure about a community contest because we already is. Hillsborough, Rio, they identified it as north and south. You can almost do north, south, east, and west. You know where you're at if you have that feature in it. But I'm more inclined to let Miller Lake do some kind of scope of work to flush out some ideas. I do like the name Crossroads, and but I think we should give people an opportunity. And it's not a popularity contest just to say, okay, who gave us the most votes? We should decide what it should be.
I have to agree with Steve in the sense that as commonly known as Ocean Breeze, and taking off a point of what Craig made, we have 4 different parcels there, and I think if we're naming it so early, we may regret that if we make some design changes that may change the complexion of the park. And if it's the commission's desire to have it handled by Miller Lake, I would support that. But I really feel like that it's premature to do this right now, only because we could change some of the concepts, and there may be some other feature in there that would become prominent that we may want to have it named that way. I don't see us naming the north, south, east, and west quadrants separately. But I personally would rather keep it as Ocean Breeze until it's time that we get to further down the design course and make sure that we know what we have there. And then if we're going to have it named, then I'd have Miller Lake handle it in some form or fashion.
When I talk to some of these people who might be interested in a P3, they seem to want to have some input as far as what the golf area would be called. And if they, they don't want to be identified with a failed golf course. So I'm agree with Bob, and I'd like to just put this off until we have some more definitive aspects of where we're going and how we're going to proceed as far as the west side too.
I think you should start on it now, because the more you drag it out, you're going to have, it's referred to a lot of different names. I do not support Ocean Breeze. I'll be out of the box on that. I do not want to be associated with a failed golf course. That was a name that came up over time. It's 4 different parks, and I'd rather we name it now. I like what the Miller Lake, go with your design people, and they came up with pretty good names, but if there's something better, I'm open to considering it. But conceptually, the whole area should be given a name. That way the city can talk to it, everyone can talk to it, and that's behind us. This is the one thing that we can control and we can do. This has taken too long, too far. Get this part out of the way and get going on it. So that's my 2 cents.
Agree with Craig. Ocean Breeze it just brings up kind of not good feelings for me, at least. I never knew the old golf course. It was a failed golf course, but after everything that's happened, I think we need to rebrand this course or the park. And I think Miller Lake has started off that really well with giving each quadrant an identity and a name. And I think the Crossroads is kind of a cool name for a park. We could talk to Miller Lake and see if they have any other ideas. I mean, Mike came up with it when we were having a meeting, just based on looking at the site plan. But I think doing it now is better. I mean, if we have one, I mean, I don't think the master plan is going to change much from what we have. This is what we've decided on. And I don't think one thing or one amenity should control what we name the park. I think it should be an all-encompassing name for the park, looking at all 4 quadrants and kind of unifying them into one name, which I think the Crossroads does. I think maybe in terms of getting input from the residents, we could open up the next meeting and announce it that we're welcoming residents to come and give us input on names or their opinions on it and things like that. But I think we've worked our butts off on this. I think we deserve to be able to put our stamp on it and name this park and vote on it. So that's my opinion on it.
Well, let's do it. You know, I really don't associate Ocean Breeze with the failed golf course. That just never occurred to me that it is, because we've been talking about it for so long that it's a parcel of property. It's a park, as far as I'm concerned, not a failed golf course. But let's put a motion out there, and I'll make a motion that we allow Miller Lake to engage in helping us name the park.
It's based on discussion, so maybe we'll talk to Brian and see the best way to do that with Miller Lake, and maybe have conversation. Oh, go ahead.
This is part of why this came up, is because part of their design was to talk about this and how we wanted to go about the branding of it. Because as we design it, a lot of these things will be part of that. So I'll talk to them about working it into the design scope so you guys can review it there.
Say too, if it comes back, I'm not creative in this. I don't have any creative strengths in this area of naming, but I'm sure they'll come back with some nice names for the facility. And with the stipulation that if we don't like any of those, we may have to do something publicly. But I think that they do enough work in this area and they've been involved in it enough to let's get it going and get it done and make everybody comfortable with this property. It's no longer a failed golf course, and move forward with it. So I'd call the question.
Commissioner Ernst, Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Collins, Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Okay, so number 3, design principles and priorities of the park. Executive Director Harms.
This is a layered one as well. So as we start talking about designing this east side, a lot of things have come up. Obviously, security is the number one priority, sustainability, shade coverage. There's a number of things that everybody has discussed as a priority. So we started working on the scope, and then we started saying, well, this isn't being honored here, and this needs to be making sure we incorporate all the landscape design, has all the safety protocols, and environmental design includes all these things. So I want to make sure that we capture everybody's priorities and everybody, vocalizes their priorities publicly. So as we do this work order, Commissioner Ernst doesn't come to me and say, why do we put this as a priority when this is a priority? Then everybody knows where everybody's priorities are, and we'll make sure that they're woven into the entire design for that east side. So I just wanted to talk tonight about priorities and what everybody wants to or has to see in this scope for the design of the east side.
Based on the master plan that we have, not adding in other or taking away pieces of it, but what you want as part of each component of the park, basically, right?
Yeah, we've talked about, like, as far as security goes, do we want to fence the entire thing in so that everybody accesses the same way, whether you live there or you live, in the district areas? Or do we want to talk about shade coverage needs to be instrumental everywhere, from the dog park to the playground to the trails having shaded areas to rest too. So those are all the things that I just wanted to talk about, because the design scope could be really, really big, or it could be really, really small. And that will all make a difference on the overall price of this project too. So if we're incorporating all these things, that will also dictate the price, so to speak, when we start putting it out there. So I just want to put this all out there, make sure we incorporate everything. So we're also not coming back in the design and adding on and increasing that price as we go.
Start on this one. Craig wants to start on this one.
I provided you some notes and I'll read them off. But as I went through the Miller Lake proposal, it was very much construction, legalese, a lot of stuff that, didn't really shape or design things. And so I think if we were approaching Miller Lake, and I realize that costs of building a park can be pretty expensive. And I think we've seen that with Silver Palm, we've seen that with Ocean Strand. So we need to do it right the first time around. So it's a master plan, but we're focused primarily on the northeast side. That's what we're focused on. And then we go to the southeast side. So in that spirit, I put 4 principles, kind of group things together, and it's not intended to be all inclusive, but if there's other ideas, add to it. But I think it should be included in the proposal to them to say they weave this in some way, somehow. So we want them to implement their conceptual plan, and that may already be in there. Number 2, we really want kind of to demonstrate an eco-green leadership, and include ADA. Will the buildings be LEED certified or not? Which buildings are we designing? The structure to design with severe weather resilience. And I sent to Brianne a Miami-Dade presentation of severe weather and how they're designing buildings in Miami now for a flood. So they build them 3 feet up. The ADA accessibility, I think we learned from Ocean Strand, the wide paths are nice. It's accessible. That's important. Recycled water, limit our waste in the park, solar panels. These are all wish list things, but how can we make them happen at a reasonable cost? In that same, spirit, we go to the number 3 is the consistent look and feel of other parks. Silver Palm, the restroom and pavilion combined. This weekend I had the pleasure of going and having breakfast at Silver Palm in the kind of the cold. And there was no one at the park, but it was really quite nice because the view of that park gives you a straight view of the Intercoastal. And it's just a beautifully well done park. And the restrooms are designed to have the overhang similar to Sugar Sand with the picnic area underneath it. I thought that was really well done. You can almost, it's a little bit cementy looking and very contemporary, but it's structurally it's very indestructible. So I don't know, we got to think about that and let them give us some options. Then I mentioned the park, it's north and south. Just directionally, we need to think about that, how we direct people to the 4 different areas. Sugar Sand Playground is one of our, and Sugar Sand, the park, is definitely one of the premier attractions. People come to this area. The design of it is well done. And whatever we do has to be on that same kind of par and caliber. So if it was whoever designed that playground originally, I know is community driven, something similar might be helpful out there to consider it. Lastly, I group public safety, park security, just think about this, the park rangers, controlled entrances. I said that park barriers are important. That could be anything that creates the buffer zone that residents have asked for. And we also have to think about the security. So it's just not easily accessible for anyone everywhere. And the controlled entrance is important. Park ranger station, I don't want to forget it, nor the maintenance facility. I think those are things you put in it now, because lesson learned from Ocean Strand, if you think you're just going to do a small part of it and then come back later, it just doesn't work like that. You might as well design it the way you want it designed the first time. And then I had identified controlled access points. We talked about that, just ability to close and limit the park capacity. Public safety, you want lightning alarms. It seems like we want to do all the right things with it, particularly if you have activities out there. And then it leads to some level of security assessment. I think that's just the nature of our community today. We need someone third party to give us help on security, to say what designs should be baked into the whole thing. And lastly, from Sugar Sand and talking to Brianne, I think pathway directionals, the more you get these big parks, it really is helpful to know where you're at and where you're going, and where the entrances and exits are. So those are the 4 characteristics I'd like to see baked into the plan. There's probably others. It's open for discussion.
So I have a lot on sustainability, because that's what I do for a living. So, so in terms of the sustainability, so there's not going to be any buildings really on the east side, bathrooms, maintenance facility, right? So we could design 2 LEED standards. There's no requirement to get a certification. We could decide to do that if we want to, but there is a cost to it. But you can design to it and achieve those points without getting certification so that you know you have that property built to those standards. In terms of the park, you can do a lead for new development, but those also incorporate buildings into it. So there's really no point in doing that. Lead for new development, it's a category. Sorry. FGBC is another certification that you can do, and there's a land development part of that that you can also do. But again, there's cost to that as well. But you can design to those credits that are within that certification. I don't know, I am getting shaky. Hold on. So a big thing that I had on here was connectivity. That's a big part of LEED. And I think that's really important, especially the fact that we have 4 different portions of our park. So having the connectivity between them and connectivity between the neighborhoods north, the neighborhoods south, and to other trails is really important as well. Having bike facilities is really important. Restoration of habitat and water bodies is important to me. That's also important for stormwater, which goes back to your talk with the not structural design, but land design in terms of stormwater management. That area does get a lot of flooding, a ton of flooding even during just a rain event. So I think stormwater design in that area and working with, who would it be, the Lake Worth Management District is something that's really, really important in that area. And then we can, like in the preserve area, we'll focus on restoring that for the habitat, the habitat restoration for wildlife and things like that. I think that's really important as well. Try to reduce our parking footprint as much as possible. I do know that the city has certain number of parking requirements, but if we can reduce that parking footprint, that would be really important as well. Local food production, which we will hopefully have our community garden over there, which is a part of LEED as well. Tree lined and shaded paths. That is a huge, huge component for me. That is something that I stress to Miller Lake, having as much shade as possible all over the park, especially for summertime. They have to make sure that the shade coverage is for overhead when it's the hottest months and things like that. So that's really important. And again, the stormwater management is important, and I am not that great at stormwater management, different ways to do it. So that we would have to leave up to Miller Lake to try to figure out the different ways that the stormwater management, components can work on this property, because I'm sure the different properties have different ways that they can do it. So that's important. Another kind of category is energy. There's really easy ways, not using solar panels, that you can reduce your energy costs in terms of exterior solar lighting and LED lighting. That's the simplest way. And most places are using LED lighting right now. Solar lighting is a little bit more expensive, but to make sure that those lightings are on timers or based on the daylight, so you're not using the lighting when you don't need it. What else? Charging stations for cars. Most places are putting those in now. I think that's really important. And then water consumption. In terms of landscape design, that's the easiest way to save on water consumption, is by designing the landscape to use as little water as possible that's needed for it. So obviously, to have as little turf as possible in the park would be ideal, because that's what's going to require water, right? So and so as little irrigation as possible, like the Broken Sound Golf Course, the way that Shannon designed that in terms of the landscape design, not obviously the turf for the golf course, but the other parts of the landscape, they are Florida native species only, require very little water. So to incorporate that as much as possible would be ideal. And then to possibly, if it's possible, do some rainwater catchment systems. I don't know if that's possible, but there is a cost to that. But that's also an educational component that we can use as part of this as well. if we decide to do that for the community. So that's energy and water. And then the last one is materials. Obviously recycling, we can work with, I know, hopefully we can get the city to do some recycling at the park. If not, we can always work with 4Ocean possibly to do some recycling there. I think that's really important. And then to look at the most optimal materials for like the pathways, talk to Miller Lake, see what's best in terms of concrete versus asphalt, try to use as much pervious material as possible in terms of the pathways, like the extra, not the main pathways, which obviously have to be concrete or asphalt for ADA, but those offshoots should be pervious as pervious as possible, like mulch pathways and things like that, so that the rainwater can go down into ground. And then designing the lighting to reduce the light pollution as little as possible would be good. Making sure the park is usable and user friendly. And then my final topic would be security, which is really important to me as well. So I looked this up a little bit, and it says that the best way to keep your parks safe is to be proactive about it, right? And have the neighborhood be proactive about it. A lot of places have these neighborhood watch programs that they implement at their parks. So that's something that we could look at. Call it a park watch program instead of a neighborhood watch program. Have lots of signage, like you said, so people don't feel like they're unsafe, because the more signs that you see and you know where you are, the safer you feel, right? So that's another thing. A possible camera system. So we can talk with the PD and see if there's some way that we can have some sort of camera system set up, if that's within our budget, and that's something that we can look at. And obviously we really need to communicate with the police department to see what ideas they have that we can implement along with them. Some sort of volunteer program that works with different aspects of the park. Like there are mountain bike volunteer communities that work out at Quiet Waters that take care of the trails. And like in North Carolina, they have communities that take care of the trails. And so they're out there and they're, you know, having people out there knowing the area and things like that. That seems to be the best way to have the residents involved in the park. And then gates, obviously, to the parking lots, making sure that they're closed when we decide that hours are, you know, whatever hours we set for the park. I don't know if fencing is necessarily something that we want there. That's something that we need to talk about. So that was my ideas. So I'm going to send that list to you on the sustainability part of it. But a lot of those things are super low hanging fruit that you just can do at little or no cost. So, you know, you just have to kind of think about them ahead of time and incorporate them into the design ahead of it, versus after the fact. So that's it.
So you guys had complete's an understatement, the kind of lists that you had, but a couple of thoughts occurred to me. I was doing a little bit of reading about the way things used to be constructed. I'm not talking about 100 or 200 years ago. I'm talking even further back than that. Back in the day when there were very few secure water sources, many cities used cisterns. And you were talking about water catchment systems. And I'll go back to the Romans. The way they constructed theirs, a minimum of energy, a maximum of usage of the water that they received. Also, when it comes to the paths, the Romans built roads that are still in use now, and they used natural materials. They didn't use asphalt. They didn't use concrete. They used stone. And I thought that might be an alternative way of constructing the paths where we need them. And also from an aesthetic standpoint, I think they look a heck of a lot better than your average stone or concrete walkway or path. It also occurred to me that, we're talking about differences between hiking trails and mountain bike trails. And there's a park near where I grew up in Queens County, New York, Alley Pond Park. And through Alley Pond Park runs the old Vanderbilt Motor Parkway, which was a main artery for about 10 or 15 years at the outset of the 20th century. This is used by both bikers, pedestrians, everybody uses it. And it's just a question of sensible practice, so to speak. So a biker won't go roaring down these things at 50 miles an hour, knocking over pedestrians like bowling pins. And pedestrians will keep to the sides of the paths to allow space for bikers to use the paths. So we don't have to worry about two different ones. Touching on storm drainage, which Aaron touched upon, I think going forward in this part of the world, that's going to be a big thing. As it is now, you can, after a heavy rain, you can go to different parks and just find standing water because it just can't drain off that quickly. I think we need to pay attention if this park is going to be used like we hope it will be used. We need to pay attention to more efficient means of drainage and stormwater control. Cameras, I think, are a good idea. This is my pet peeve. When I go past a park or somebody's home and it's pouring out and the sprinklers are on, bugs the heck out of me. And I'd like to see a way where we can control so that sprinklers, when it's pouring out, that we don't have sprinklers running.
It's rain sensors that you can attach
Okay,
to
well,
sprinkler systems that most
unfortunately,
houses just don't
yeah,
have.
yeah. In my neighborhood, they don't know what rain sensors are, but I'm glad you brought that up.
Can have for your for like your sod, and if it needs water, it'll turn it on. If it doesn't need water, it won't turn on. So there's different things like that where you can.
That's good to know. And I think that's something that should be incorporated in the parks. And I think that's about it. Everything you got, I have to commend you both because you really took a long, hard look into things and you came up with some great ideas. So kudos to both of you.
Well, I think we could talk about this for a couple hours with sustainability and those things. And I value the comments that I wish Miller Lake could have been here this evening because they probably could have guided us on some of these things that and they should probably hear these things. I was thinking in terms of the safety issues and the paths and the trails. There's a trail over at the library. I don't remember the name of it. You go back into the woods back there and you disappear for about 30 minutes. And I told my wife, do not go back there without me because I was concerned about safety and you never know this time of year where people are going to be camping out. Without getting any more specifics, you see them on the streets during the day and you don't know where they go at night. And so any of these areas that we do as far as the paths and they need to be clear in the sense that you can see around the corner. You need to be able to feel secure in the park, which I don't when I go to this park over here. I don't. If I do that, I carry protection with me because I never know who you're going to run into over there. But the other, from a safety aspect too, that I've noticed in some of the parks that are larger like this is that, and FAU has done this, is they've had pull stations where you can actually get emergency assistance, by, it's connected to the police department, where you can get medical attention. If you're having people with riding mountain bikes through there, you're going to have incidents that are going to occur. And so I think that having some method of being able to connect with, um, getting some medical attention to you if you needed to straight away. The signage, I think, Craig mentioned that pathway directional signs. I think that if we're going to talk about signs, we should have signs that says you are here. And then you've got a diagram of where the rest of the park is so that in addition to directions, you have an idea as to where you want to go. And then there may be some way signs that direct you there. And I was thinking also of other features. Now we're just talking about the northeast section of the east side. We're not talking about the south side.
South side, it's just trails and the restrooms there, so it's
Well,
would be similar, but
and that Miller Lake, one of those, I thought there were, some, one building for an indoor facility like pickleball or an outdoor for another type of activity.
that would be through the P3 though. Miller Lake won't design that facility.
Okay, but that was space down there that was
Yes.
reserved for that. So,
Yes.
Okay, just want to be certain of that. And we have a community garden planned in there. Who's going to do it?
Of the junior league. So I haven't contacted her yet, but I need to contact her to see if they're interested in doing a northern kind of community park, in addition to the one that they do at Meadows.
I'm all in favor of that. If we can get a commitment to do that. We had a commitment to do the Science Museum at Sugar Sand Park because there was one over there at the old Boca Mall. I don't know whether you were old enough to remember the Boca Mall, but it was a mall there that whenever it rained, you had to take your shoes off to walk into the mall. It always flooded, but there was a science museum in there that had summer camps and so forth. And they agreed to support us and they helped us with the design of the science museum. And then when we got it all done, we couldn't find the volunteers. So I'd want to nail that down, that we had somebody that's going to actually do that before, as we plan that out, and they need to specifically commit to it. And I was thinking the gentleman that spoke last week, we didn't have this design, but a barrier-free park for those kids that are handicapped, I think needs to be part of this design over there, because there's not one in town anywhere. And if we're going to build a park, I think that needs to be a component of it. And I don't know where else we would put that. Maybe you could put that in place of the dog park, for instance, but I think that we need to think about that particular facility. Listening to the plea of this gentleman who had a child that, could not access a lot of the things over at Sugar Sand Park. I had sympathy for them. And I think we need to consider that. The final thing is that perhaps as long as we have the current administration in downtown, there's still going to be thought about bifurcation of our park with Clintmore Road. And that obviously concerns me in terms of our design over there. So how we traverse north and south on this park. And if we're going to have trails that are going to cross over what could be the extension of Clintmore, we need to think about how we're going to get those people down there without having to cross traffic. And I think someone once proposed a tunnel there to make that happen. Down the road, I don't know how long it's going to take. It may not be during Scott Singer's term as mayor, but he's the one that always keeps telling us we're going to have this happen where that road's going to go through. At some point, we need to think about, being aware. And if there is an initiative to make that go through, we should be, bold enough to try to think about accessibility to the southern part and from the southern part to the northern part. You guys did such a great job with the sustainability, Craig. I can envision you sitting there at the park thinking about these things in deep thought, because you did put a lot of thought into this, and certainly have embarrassed me that you were you and Aaron were the top performers in this analysis, and I thank you for that. I'm anxious to get this going, anxious to get these components, anxious to find out about from what our bond counsel has to say, so we can actually make some progress, some meaningful progress with this. And Jake is reaching for his microphone there.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just to that end, we have every reason to believe that Brian Miller and Ms. Herring are on schedule, and we hope to have a report at the February meeting.
Talking to you, but
That's
I'm
right.
glad you jumped in there and fill that in. But Madam Chair, that's all the comments I can make. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just had one little bit of feedback for you on, it's funny that you say that about the scrub area, because that's my favorite place to walk when I go off the trail. Yeah, and the Yamato scrub area off of Yamato. I have never run into anything out there. And I know there is residential condos that are right there, so I don't know if they've ever had any issues about anything, or, but because when I go out there, although you can see those buildings, you feel like you're in nature and not in the middle of concrete. And that's my favorite part about that park, is not the super lit sidewalk trail, or not, it's not lit, but it's, you know, concrete and whatnot, and then turf on the side. So when you go out into the scrub area and you're surrounded by sable palms and things like that, and you see, you know,
You're
nature.
you're a lot braver than most folks. Here was my concern about that, and I mentioned it to Brianne, and it's a county park, so we don't have any sway over that. Is that you get back there in the back, you have an elderly person who has a heart attack. There is no way that anybody's going to know about that. You can lay there until you come along the next day, and so to me that was lack of security. You talking about security? I think that's a very insecure place. And if you're running through there, that's one thing. You know.
Well, yeah, and that's why that, like, when you go into a trail like that, most of those parks have signs on, you know, this is how long it is from point A, and if it's a, you know, a circle, or if it's an out and back, so that, you know, you're well aware of your, you know, your capabilities, and it is sugar sand, so it's not like a concrete path. There are some concrete paths back there. But so, you know, that people have to also take responsibility for themselves as well, knowing what they're doing. And well, if I don't feel safe on a sugar sand path, well, maybe I'll go this way instead and stay on the concrete path. I think that we have to also expect our residents and the people who visit our parks to also, you know, be accountable for themselves and the places that they go as well.
You've taken it well beyond my intention in bringing this up, because you know, you weren't here when there was a boy and a girl that were out west before that was developed, that were picnicking out there, and they never came out alive. And you know, you hear about these tragic things all the time, and I'm just saying, I do not want I'm as much an environmentalist. There's nothing I like better than walking in the woods when I go to Tennessee and hiking in that, and I enjoy that because there's nobody around for miles. But when we have a park that's heavily foliaged, where you cannot see beyond the edge of the foliage, that concerns me as a commissioner. And I'm not talking about putting lights there, but I'm just saying that I don't want something that's so overgrown that it creates a safety issue, as I consider this place to be a safety issue that you're talking about, strictly from the standpoint of, you have older people that walk there, you have young kids that walk there, and I'm always concerned about security, and I think that's a security issue over there. That at some point, you know, something could happen, and I hope that it never does. And I hope that someday we'll be able to talk the county into putting some type of a station back there where you could pull it if you needed assistance, because you get to the very back of it before you make the turn. You're in there pretty deep, and I don't even think you can see any condos from there. But anyway, I rest my case, Aaron. That's just really from a secure standpoint. Over there, let's have plenty of, native plants and foliage, but let's keep it where it doesn't look like it's overgrown and unkept.
Well, I consulted with a number of professionals who make their living in security. And one of the things that they did say was, um, one said, let's have a lot of planting between the condos and the park. But the other one who it made more sense, he said, you don't want to have a lot of tall bushes or trees that you can't get a line of sight to where these people are going to be. You know, I agree. Let's have a canopy over, not messy canopy, but a nice canopy of trees over these trails. And let's get some phones in there. The priority is, like they have on the college campuses. Apparently the park rangers are working on something for some of the parks and for FAU to have that system. So that would be something maybe we could piggyback a contract on. As far as when you mentioned Broken Sound, the beehives. I'd love to see something to do with, the beehives, because, we could have our own brand of honey or something, but that would be something for the environment and we could keep going. You guys all did a great job. So you really touched on everything, all of my notes, but I do think that we could have a partnership for the community garden. There is a concern that I've heard from from the Boca Chica residents about the noise from the dog park. I don't know how we can alleviate that. Dogs are loud. Dogs are messy. I love dogs. I'd love for our dog park to require rabies inoculations and have the dogs have some type of protection so that if they do get into an altercation, that the dogs are not going to spread a disease. They don't do that at the dog park off of Military. So, but you guys touched on everything. I love to see everything that you've talked about incorporated.
All good comments. A couple thoughts is, and I think Bob touched on it. I kind of overlooked it is, the spirit of the community is volunteers. The Science Exploratorium was made with that. Gumbo Limbo was made with that. So part of the facilities that if the only structure that is out there for near the dog park, the community garden, that there really should be some kind of, overhang or meeting place area where people have shelter and protection from rain, thunder, whatever it is. So that it's got to be sufficient in size so that it can do that, as well as encourage, maybe a small meeting space for volunteers. I think that really is important for whatever happens. What we want this is to be run by the community eventually, a little bit more community input, but at least build out the space as you're doing. So, and then the last thought was, until Steve mentioned it, I never considered a moat as a barrier around the park, but I would give it consideration. Let Miller Lake figure out what the barrier is. I have no idea of how that's going to happen, but there needs to be a barrier between just walking in between condo buildings or whatever it is, but it's got to be thought out, and that'll add to the security so you have limited entrance and exit. So that's my 2 cents, but all of it's good. I think Miller Lake, if they watch any of this, will get the concepts, but maybe bulletize it and give it to them as an addendum.
We're meeting tomorrow to go over all this and I have 4 pages of notes here. So I feel like we have a lot to work into the work order now. So thank you all for doing that tonight.
Okay, are we done? Yes. Okay, so let's move on to approval of payroll and invoices. Craig?
Madam Chair, I'd like to present payroll and invoices in the amount of, let me get my glasses, it'll be a little easier to read, make sure I don't make a mistake, $334,560.39. May I have a motion?
Yeah. Roll call.
Commissioner Ernst, Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins, Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Wright.
Okay, reports and discussion items. Brianne?
Commissioners, on January 10th, I attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting to get the site plan approval for our pickleball courts at Patch Reef. Mike Connors attended from CGA as well, and the plan was unanimously approved. And the board had a lot of good questions and good feedback, so it was a good meeting to attend. Pipes and pumping project is continuing over at Gumbo Limbo. They're expecting some equipment to get delivered, and then another 6 to 8 weeks left of electrical work and restoration for the landscaping area. So it's looking like a March or April maybe to finish that out. And then bids are due this week for the tower project. So we're anxiously awaiting to see how that goes. And then the DeHornley Maintenance Building was Aaron's Companies was approved. It's AHREN. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but they were approved and the contract is being finalized. And then you all received your passes to the pickleball tournament this weekend. So be sure to stop by Patch Reef, and you can contact me or we'll fill Joanne in when she gets back about parking. We'll talk about, if anybody has any questions about any of it, just let me know and we'll get the answers for you. And that's all I have.
Just wanted to reiterate that we are waiting for the report from Jolinda Herring and Brian Miller and Olive with regards to the bond implications on the soon to be named park. We anticipate having a presentation on the February 6th agenda. We will report back to that effect. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, who wants to go first? Steve?
I just have one thing and something to touch on what Bob brought up about parks for disabled kids. Pirates Cove needs to be refurbished, and I thought that would be an excellent place to start with a project like that, to have what's the heck's word I'm looking for? To have pieces in that park, components that could be utilized by kids who are in wheelchairs or who need oxygen or are otherwise compromised as to what they can do in a regular park. And I don't think it would be that expensive, but I think it's something that Calvin Giordano could look at and, you know, tell us what's feasible, what's not.
Yes, Steve. That's I guess a couple things this week, and I had the opportunity to go to, as I mentioned, Silver Palm Park. Very impressed with the whole facilities and the wildflower park, I should say, the combined facilities. Definitely a must go to place. I also had the opportunity to go see Brightline, and I did the Brightline station, exploring it a bit while I went downtown to see the MLK events. And I will tell you that the MLK hosted events by the city was fantastic. They really did a good job. All of the speakers were, you know, very, I'd say insightful. They had the Boca band marching as well as the FAU jazz band, ensemble, I should say. And the speakers were outstanding. And then they covered a lot of just community service type ideas. It was capped off with an individual who won the humanitarian award for the community. And it was all about Dixie Manor and what she did to push for no longer waiting for things. And it was her genuineness of accepting it was just, as a lifelong resident of Boca, I was just thoroughly impressed with her work and done. So there's a lot of good community giving people out there, and they were at the MLK event. So that was next year. I'd encourage everyone to go. And then I guess those are the big things. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this board and work with everyone. And I think it's we're off to a good start. Thank you.
I agree with you, Craig. It's a great board to be on. You know, the one thing I would, and I support Steve's suggestion about Pirates Cove, but I would like to know if that's the best place for it in terms of these usually have to be a little bit larger than probably what we have over at Pirates Cove to accommodate these. But if Calvin Diagiano thinks that it's an appropriate place to do it, I would certainly support that, Steve. The sooner the better, and that would be a faster place to go if there's space over there. Yeah, and I think if there is space and to accommodate that, then I would certainly go forward with that. I don't know at our last meeting whether or not Greg Stevens had been put in that position permanently as the director, and he hasn't. Oh, okay, well, I know if he's listening, I just want to tell you how excited I am about having him in that position because he knows recreation better than anybody that we've had since Mickey Gomez, and the people that are below him are been elevated up to. So we have a wonderful chain of command there to go through for fields. And the one thing that I'd like to find out too from Greg or Brian, you can sort this out, is when phase 2, what's the status of phase 2 over at DeHornley? If you know the answer. Okay.
There's no status. CJ was at the meeting with me at Parks and Rec, and he actually asked about it. And right now there is no status update. Nothing has moved forward on it. And while I have the microphone, just for a point of clarification on the Patrick Park Pirates Cove, we also have WZA under a contract, a continuing services agreement, and we have CGA working on so much. My preference is to ask them to evaluate that site if everybody's okay with that and have them look at it. Okay.
Yeah. The reason I was asking about phase 2 is that I've recently had the opportunity to play Solomon on some fields space, and there's such a demand on our fields, and as our population continues to grow, if you look around, you know, where my office is, you know, there are places springing up, you know, apartment complexes there at Yamato and Congress. There's a lot more younger people in the park where my office is. I see them walking with their kids and riding, and so I don't know what we can do to encourage the city to move forward with that, but I know that they had engaged Calvin Giordano to do the design, and they put that on hold. But I would just say that as a person who recreates in this town, and I see the demand that is on our facilities, we're wearing out some of these places. We did a great job by putting in the artificial surface over at Patch Reef, and that field gets a lot of usage, and it's very durable. You don't have to shut it down for maintenance. You don't have to shut it down if you get a little rain. So we can do that. The other thing, Brian, too, is just follow up with the city regarding the screening over there on those fields that we talked about with at the end to prevent the balls from going into the street, and also going into the canal behind the fields over there at DeHornley. And I'm real curious because it's not often I get to see Art Turple and Raul, two of my favorite pickleball people, here at a meeting. And I thought they might have been here to talk about the tournament. But it's always good to see both of you. Art, I talked to you on the phone, but never in person. And Raul, thank you for coming too. I'm excited about where we're going with these pickleball courts over at Patch Reef. And I know we can't get those done soon enough because I hear so many people say that Hillsborough is just so busy that you can hardly get a court time over there, you know. So we'll get that going as soon as we possibly can. And what's the status on
Moving forward? I mean, we're still on track to get started. It was approved by the Parks and Rec Board, so we're just finishing with the site approval process, and then hopefully we're out to bid by March.
Okay, all right. So you think that'll get if we go out to bid March, you think by December we'll have anything? Or
We'd like to, by December, we'd like to have the pickleball done. I'm going to knock on wood, knock on anything, whatever the good luck is, because we just want it all to run smoothly, obviously. By March of 2024, we would hope to have the entire thing done, the tennis courts resurfaced, the pickleball done, the roof in, but that's, hopefully everything goes as planned.
Okay, well, just, it started with Raul pounding on us for years. And so I want him to be able to see the fruits of his labor as soon as possible. So thank you both for coming tonight. That's all, Madam Chair.
I want to congratulate Greg as well, because I see the fruits of his labor with the staff that I work with over at Woodlands and at been working with over at Sugar Sand. There's a definite difference in their enthusiasm. They were enthusiastic before, but now they are over the top. And Greg, I have a feeling that you're responsible for the camaraderie and all of the positive feelings that are coming to the public and to groups like Top Soccer. We started on Saturday, and staff couldn't have been more helpful. So I want to thank the city for all they're doing and for for promoting Greg and the other staff members.
Thank you. I have nothing except for, I'm excited to get those pickleball courts done too, because it's hard to find a place to play, but not even like me or my husband, but like the kids, because we can go places, but then the kids aren't welcome to play because it's too competitive. So to have a place where everybody can go and play and be welcome would be great. So hopefully we can set up Patry to be that way, so that families can play too and kids can play too. That would be awesome. And I think that's it.
Ern.
Ernst. Sorry. Commissioner Engel. Commissioner Rollins. Commissioner Vogelsang.
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.